Hey everybody, I hope everyone's doing incredibly well out there. It's a Monday, and your Monday, I hope, was spectacular. Doing something a little bit different today, we're going to be talking about Black Myth Wukong, but in particular about reasons why you should be excited, but also reasons why you should err on the side of caution. Not every game is perfect, no matter what people say. There are games that you're going to be incredibly excited about, but there's also reasons why, even with that excitement, you should show a little bit of hesitation. Not saying that you shouldn't think this game or any game out there should be a complete disaster, but I think it's fair to say that you should go into it with a critical sense of mind. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. So, I want to talk about the reasons why I think you should be excited for Black Myth Wukong. For starters, Black Myth Wukong looks, as we can see, absolutely gorgeous. It is a beautiful looking game. Now, graphics aren't everything. You don't need a game to look absolutely stunning to enjoy it. And even then, the prettiest games out there sometimes are often quite shallow. There's nothing to them. They're just very, very pretty, and that's really it mechanically. They haven't got a lot going on. The story's quite middling. You're really just looking at a very, very pretty box. But in this case, I think there is a little bit of substance to it, mostly because they're drawing upon Chinese mythology, which is great. You've got a lot of source material there. There's a lot to draw upon. So the graphics, I think, are going to be aiding that rather than being the only thing to be excited for. One of the other big reasons we should be excited for Black Myth Wukong is simply game science. Now, despite what some press out there have reported on, namely IGN and The Guardian, of which I'm not going to be touching here, I have my own personal thoughts about that. And this isn't the time or place to discuss it, but we're just going to be talking about game science themselves. Now, they are developers who haven't had a huge foray of video games in the AA or AAA space, but they have been incredibly open about the game. They've shown a lot of footage off to the media, to the press. A lot of different content creators have had a chance to play Black Myth Wukong, and from all reports, they're incredibly impressed. It's absolutely phenomenal. Some of the positive feedback that's coming Black Myth Wukong in game science's way, which is great to see. Now, another big point for me personally is that Black Myth Wukong is set in a part of gaming industry's most underutilized mythology, and that's Chinese mythology. And like the Journey to the West and the Sun King, it's just something that we don't see a lot of in video games. Right now, there seems to be a push to really get that, to fix that, to amend it, to really tap into the Chinese market, which is great. It's a very, in terms of video game, it's mostly an untapped resource here in the West. And I think there's obviously the business standpoint of really appealing to the Chinese audience and maybe getting a huge amount of money coming away from there. But it's another reason for us as Westerners, as Western players, to get excited about new games and to figure out, to find maybe our new niche. So much out there is so many video games out there are really focusing on, say, Japanese mythology or Norse mythology, that we forget that China has a rich history of mythology as well. And I think it does a disservice to all of video game, really, that we're not exploring it a little bit more. There's that game coming out on PlayStation soon, I think. Soon? I think soon. Hopefully, the end of the year where wins meet. But for now, Black Myth Wukong is really the center point of Chinese mythology in video games. Now, another big point to make, and this I believe is a positive, is that it's not a Soulsborne. The developers have specifically gone on record just to highlight that Black Myth Wukong is not a Soulsborne. It's taking inspiration in its combat from the Soulsborne genre, but it's first and foremost sort of a narrative driven RPG. You're in the role of the Monkey King. You are here. You are rewriting history, though it's strictly not following the mythology and the journey to the West itself. It's really just carving its own path. But nonetheless, it has got Souls like mechanics involved, but it isn't a Soulsborne. With that said, combat looks amazing. It looks fantastic. Oddly enough, ironically enough, it looks as fluid as what you'd come to expect from a Soulsborne, particularly a FromSoft game. So that's a huge plus, and I think that's something that's really going to lean into its favor. It's focusing a lot on that action combat experience. in this incredibly detailed and beautiful world. With all that said, mind you, we should also probably point out some of the, let's not say negatives, because they're not negatives. These are just more taking a critical approach to what we've seen. As we've said, the graphics are absolutely fantastic. However, Game Science really has only made two other games prior to this. Both are mobile games. One is Red Tides, which is a RTS, and then you've got 100 Heroes, which is using the Three Kingdoms, the romance of the Three Kingdoms as a background, but obviously, as you can tell, it's a very fantastical take on it. But nonetheless, these are the only two games they've had. They've got plenty of awards for their mobile games, but there's nothing really to say that Black Myth Wukong will be just as good or be as anywhere close to being what we expect, considering the scope that they're aiming for. So definitely something to keep in mind if you are on the fence about Black Myth Wukong. Maybe you need to wait until the reviews are out rather than pre-ordering. And I do have something to say about pre-ordering at the end of this video. It's going to be a little bit controversial. However, I do stand by it. Another one of the big problems that I can foresee with Black Myth Wukong is, despite the fact that they have been incredibly open with showing off gameplay, the majority of that gameplay is really just bosses. So we have these moments like you're seeing on screen now where they're just very linear. You're moving from one area to another. It's very choreographed. There's not a lot really in the way of exploration or environmental storytelling places you can see, except for these extremely narrow paths. And that has, it makes me a little bit nervous, I have to admit. Again, you can be excited for a game, as I am. I'm very excited for Black Myth Wukong, but I'm nervous as well that this is just going to be a boss rush simulator. You're just going to be going from one boss to the next, just taking them on with nothing in between. You don't get a chance to soak up this beautiful world and this beautiful part of the world inspired by a really rich history. And that would be an incredible shame if we just don't get a chance to stop and smell the roses, something a lot of action games really fail to do. Now, that brings me to another big point, particularly about the bosses, and that's simply put that a lot of the bosses look the same. We've seen in a lot of gameplay footage, and there is a lot of reskins or even just simply the same boss repeated. And that's a little bit worrying. They have gone on record, and that's Game Size has gone on record, that there are, I think, 80 bosses in the game, 80 enemies to take on, 80 main enemies, which sounds really good on paper, but that's a lot to choose from. Like, I don't care how big, how impressive your pedigree is as a developer. 80 bosses is a huge amount. Is a huge amount to be able to create these individual, unique experience boss battles. FromSoft, who has been developing one particular type of game, one amazing type of game, I must say, just because they're developing the same game just with a different skin doesn't make it good. Even they would struggle to have 80 unique encounters. For a studio that has only produced mobile games to go into then creating a game with just so many different boss battles that each should feel slightly different, it's no wonder that there's reskins. It's just worrying that there's going to be too many reskins, that you're going to be fighting the same boss over and over again, maybe just slightly different colors or slightly tweaked mechanics. But really, that's probably the only negatives we can point out. And again, they're not negatives. We need to think critically in this day and age, particularly when it comes to the hugely expensive AA or even AAA titles. With the cost of living, I think it's more and more important to question what we're seeing in video games. Not to be dicks or not to call out developers or be nasty to developers, but simply put, we are spending a lot of money on these video games. Black Myth Wukong is 90 AUD. Just for the base game, if you want the digital deluxe, it's 105 AUD. That is the amount of petrol I put in my car for a fortnight. It's a lot. It's a lot of money. So I think we need to be really demanding value for our dollars. I'm not saying every game needs to be a Baldur's Gate 3 where you're putting in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. I'm just saying that we need to be skeptical when it comes to developers and make sure that what they're showing off is what we're going to get, and that it's going to be, the promises they make are going to be kept. In terms of pre-ordering, I don't think we should be pre-ordering games. that's not the controversial part. The controversial part is that I think it's safe to pre-order games from particular developers. For instance, if you're a fan of Persona games or you're a fan of what Atlas puts out, I think it's more than safe to pre-order their titles. ReFantazio is coming out soon. I am happy to say that I will be pre-ordering that game. It's right up my alley. Black Myth Wukong, despite the fact that it is really a developer dipping their toes into such a grandiose scope after they've only worked on mobile games, I still think it's safe to pre-order this game provided it's got exactly what you're looking for, that you are prepared to take a risk. So pre-ordering, I think, has its positives in the sense that it's okay to pre-order from developers are going to produce quality work. So with all that said, I am excited for Black Myth Wukong, but I am also cautious. And I think it's safe to actually have both feelings. You can be excited for something and you can be cautious about something. I will be pre-ordering this game just so I can play it on day one, just so I can share it with everyone. Maybe there are a few people on the fence, and I hope I can either persuade you into keeping your money and saving for it beyond special, or seeing that, yep, that's the game for me, I'm going to go spend some money on that, just to stop you from going out and just making the mistake that I might be making. I don't think I will, but you never know, I could be making that mistake. That'll be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Do all that YouTube jazz if you want to. If you don't, that's not a problem. I'm not going to hold it against you. I'm just really happy you stuck around. See you next time. Bye.